Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. And in this video, I'm going to give you my top starts of the week for week 8 of the 2023 fantasy football season. Before we get into it, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into those starts of the week. We're going to start with the quarterback position. And one guy that really stood out to me when I was looking at the quarterback landscape in fantasy this week was Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. I really want to highlight him because I feel like some people might be turning away from him coming off of a really bad performance last week in week 7. But I am expecting a bounce back here. In week 7, he was on the road against a really tough Baltimore Ravens defense, and they just got absolutely blown out. It just wasn't even close. Just right around 10 fantasy points. Really bad if you started him. But I wouldn't turn away from him unless you have a really high-end quarterback that you can turn to, because he is taking on the Las Vegas Raiders at home. Jared Goff at home is someone that you always want to consider. He performs really well in that stadium, and he's taking on a secondary in the Raiders that he can definitely dissect. I think he should be able to bounce back in this game. He's been really reliable this season when he's at home, and he's just had a lot of good performances on the year. I'm not going to let one bad game on the road against a tough Ravens defense make me just refuse to start him. So in week 8 against the Raiders, I really like Jared Goff to have a big game. David Montgomery, running back of the Detroit Lions, also missed week 7. And in week 8, it is looking like Montgomery might miss the game again, just based on his practice reports. And because the Lions do have their bye week in week 9, they might just hold him out one more week, get him through the bye week, and then bring Montgomery back in week 10. So if he is out, that just means possibly more passing game, and that means more Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield, who is very good as a passer. So either way, I love Jared Goff as a quarterback 1 in week 8 against the Raiders. And speaking of Jahmyr Gibbs, he is going to be my first running back start of the week for the Detroit Lions. He has been quite the disappointment this year. Drafted very early in the draft. His rookie year has not gone according to plan for fantasy. Weeks 1 through 4, he never surpassed double digits in half PPR. Missed weeks 5 and 6, but in week 7 last week, even though they got absolutely demolished, with David Montgomery, fellow running back of the Lions, missing that game with injury, we saw Jahmyr Gibbs get 11 carries, which turned into 68 yards and a touchdown. And he also saw 10 targets, which turned into 9 for 58 through the air. He is a great start this week in week 8, especially if David Montgomery misses the game, okay? If Montgomery does play, Gibbs' value is going to take a hit. So just monitor what the news is saying. Like, if Montgomery doesn't play at all, Gibbs is a smash play. You got to get him in the lineup in this matchup. Especially, we saw last week, even in a brutal game where they just got demolished. It was a tough defense. He was still the running back 3 overall on the week with 23.1 points in half PPR. You got to get him in the lineup if Montgomery is out. If Montgomery is active, still listen to see, like, you know, if people are saying he's active, but he's going to be limited, Gibbs might still be very involved. So I think Montgomery's going to be out. I'm recording this on Thursday, October 26th at 7:22 p.m. Central Time. So just monitor the news and the reports. But especially if Montgomery's out, I love Jahmyr Gibbs this week against the Raiders in week 8. And I am going to go back to the well with another start of the week for Isiah Pacheco against the Denver Broncos. I made him a start of the week in week 6, 2 weeks ago, against the same Broncos defense, and he was pretty solid. 12.8 points in half PPR, was the running back 14 on the week in that format. Put up, 16 for 62 on the ground. He saw 6 targets, which you love to see, caught 6 of them for 36 yards. It was a good performance. I was expecting more, but you're still going to be happy with that. So he's taking on that same team just a couple weeks later, and I would not be surprised if he outperforms what he did a couple weeks ago against this really exploitable Denver Broncos defense. And he's just been really great since week 3. 14.8, 23.3, 12.9, 12.8, and 14 points in half PPR. Unless you're running, I can't imagine that you're not starting Pacheco this week unless you're running back core or you have some sort of flex option that is just super elite. I like Pacheco as a low to mid running back 1 this week. I think he's very safe, especially with his passing game involvement, especially with the matchup. But The Chiefs only put up 19 points in week 6 against this team. I think they could definitely outdo that performance in this one. So he's a good bet for a touchdown, and he's going to see a ton of volume in a great matchup. So fire up Isiah Pacheco in week 8. Next up, we have Kareem Hunt, running back of the Cleveland Browns. Now, he is dealing with a bit of an injury, so monitor the news, but it's looking like he's going to be good to go for week 8 against the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, we know Nick Chubb out for the year early on in the season, and then Jerome Ford was kind of the lead back, with Kareem Hunt kind of working in tandem with him. It's looking like Ford is going to miss this game against the Seattle Seahawks here in week 8. And Kareem Hunt, he should see a lot of opportunity, and I think that this is a good place for him to succeed for fantasy here. The last couple weeks, he's been a running back 1. 2 weeks ago against the San Francisco 49ers, 12 for 47 and a touchdown on the ground. Caught his 3 targets for 24 yards through the air, 14.6 points at half PPR, the running back 10. And then last week, he was the running back 11 in a game where I was actually able to start him in my Dynasty League, thankfully enough. He finished with 15.1 points, 10 for 31 on the ground, got 2 touchdowns. So not super efficient the last couple weeks, but he's a pretty safe bet for double-digit carries here. Should see, a couple targets, a few targets, and I think he is a nice low running back 2 play, someone you can put in the flex. Not really a must start, but someone where if you have injuries, definitely someone you can play. I know in my Dynasty League, I picked up Darrell Henderson and Kareem Hunt in the offseason when they were free agents. I've been holding them ever since then, and now they're both like usable fantasy assets. So it's looking like I am going to be starting Kareem Hunt in that league. And I'm actually very excited that I'm able to do so because I don't, he's going to have to probably get in the end zone to be a running back 1 again, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does that. And with the injuries in the Cleveland backfield, he's going to be the guy. So fire him up as a nice running back 2 flex option in week 8 against the Seattle Seahawks. Next up, we're going with the Gus Bus at the running back position. It's kind of like Kareem Hunt where he's benefiting statistically from an injury. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins suffered that season-ending injury very early on. And even since then, it hasn't been great for fantasy for Gus Edwards. Running back 8 since week 2. Running back 18, 42, 38, 35, 35. Last week, he was the running back 6 on the week, 20.9 points in half PPR. This call that I'm making right here is not an overreaction to him having, one good game and saying, oh my God, he's amazing. This is just me trying to find someone out there where if you're dealing with injuries and you need someone to play, I think Gus Edwards, you could do a lot worse than him this week because he's taking on the Arizona Cardinals, which is a pretty nice matchup here. I don't think that the Cardinals are really going to be stopping Gus Edwards on defense. And he is the lead back there for this Baltimore Ravens offense. So the last few, handful of weeks, he's seen 15, 12, 16, and 14 carries. Not seeing much work in the passing game really at all. That's more Justice Hill. But I'm not calling for a 20-point performance here, but this is definitely someone that you can put in your flex, put in your running back 2 spot if you're dealing with injuries. And I think he's a pretty good bet to be a nice solid running back 2 flex option this week against the Arizona Cardinals. And then I have one more, well, kind of 2 more running back starts of the week for my last start of the week at the position. I had a lot of guys at the running back spot that I really wanted to highlight this week. And the last duo that I want to talk about here is the Carolina Panthers backfield with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders for the Carolina Panthers here. Miles Sanders has been a disappointment with the contract he got with his draft capital in fantasy. He had 1 running back 1 performance, and that's pretty much because he fell in the end zone. Got 14.7 points in half PPR. Missed week 6 with injury. Coming off a bye in week 7, they are now taking on the Houston Texans, which is a great matchup for running backs in fantasy. In week 6, with no Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard had a great week, 15.5 points. The running back 7 on the week in half PPR. If it was just one of these guys active, they would be a smash play. But because Miles Sanders is coming back, it's a little bit murky, but I just want to bring up this game and this matchup because there is an opportunity for fantasy goodness here at the running back position. And with the injuries we've suffered this year, you're definitely probably looking for someone that you can play at running back or even in your flex spot. So if Chuba Hubbard was alone, I mean, he would be amazing, but I'm not sure who's going to really be the lead back. Miles Sanders is coming off that injury and he hasn't been efficient. Chuba has probably been the better player actually so far this season, and in his 1 game as the starter, he put up a lot of numbers. So I'm not sure who is ultimately going to be the lead back between these two. Maybe monitor reports, see what people are saying, but These are both guys that you can definitely flex, and just because of the matchup. And I would be shocked if at least one of these two doesn't have a good game. Hopefully they're both solid, but just people to monitor, people to watch, and if you need someone, definitely flex options here against these Houston Texans defense. We're going to move on to the wide receiver position finally. And the first guy I'm going to talk about is DeVonta Smith. And these videos are a little weird sometimes to make and decide who to talk about because, you know, there's some players where it's like you almost feel like you can't talk about them because they're such obvious starts. But then through the ebbs and flows of their careers, they become almost people that you can talk about as starts of the week. So like Lamar Jackson is someone who I love this week. And there's been times in his career where it's like he hasn't been playing the best for fantasy, and it's like, okay, I'm going to bring up Lamar Jackson in a good matchup or whatever. And I just bring that up because I feel like DeVonta Smith is that player. Pretty much since he's been in the league, he's been someone that you're pretty much playing most weeks. Or it kind of reminds me of T. Higgins earlier in the year. Like I made him a weak start in week 2 because he got goosed in week 1, and he had a big bounce back game. But DeVonta Smith, I just want to bring him up because if you are, kind of thinking about benching him, it better be for a very good option because I think he's going to have a good game in week 8 against Washington. I understand the temptation to kind of want to turn away from him. The last few weeks have been awful. 14.2 and 21.1 points in weeks 1 and 2 and half PPR, but since then 4.8, 11.3, 1.1, 6.9, and 6.9. Very nice last couple of weeks there. But I'm just calling for a bounce back game here. We know he's a good player. AJ Brown, stud alpha wide receiver 1 for the same Philadelphia Eagles team, has just really been taking over. I believe he tied, I heard this on the Fantasy Footballers, he tied or set an NFL record for consecutive 125-yard plus games with like 5. That's AJ Brown, fellow wide receiver. So when you have a teammate that's doing that, obviously the production is going to suffer for other receiving options, but I don't expect, that trend to continue. It is literally an NFL record. So I think eventually we're going to see production go to DeVonta Smith's way. It's definitely someone where unless you have elite options to replace him with, I'm just sticking with DeVonta Smith. His bounce back game is going to come, and he's taking on the Washington Commanders, a team that he can exploit. He's had really good games against them in the past. And even a few weeks ago, amidst this kind of tough stretch, he was still 7 for 78 through the air, 11.3 points and half PPR. Not a crazy performance, but something you'll definitely take as a wide receiver in your fantasy lineup. So I really like DeVonta Smith as a wide receiver 2 this week against Washington. Next up at wide receiver, I'm going to go with Christian Kirk, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jags. This is a guy that I really didn't want to draft at all. It was kind of looking like his role might be limited this year, but he has been balling out lately. Might have something to do with Zay Jones, fellow wide receiver on that team, being out. But he's been a PPR machine lately. Just really, really solid for fantasy. Week 1, only 1.4 points, but since then, 16.5, 13.4, 12.4, 11.4, 12.4, and 16.5. He had a 4-game stretch of 0.4s in there. That's kind of interesting. But coming off a 16-point game in half PPR here, his target totals since week 2, 14, 6, 12, 8, 6, 6. Now he's taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is not a steel curtain defense. This is a matchup that can be exploited in the secondary. They give up points to wide receivers. He's being targeted. He's being utilized. And it would be very, very hard to turn away from him at this point in the season where he's just seemingly just balling out. I'm not sure what the status is of Zay Jones. I am recording this on Thursday, as I said, so please always monitor the news when you're watching this video, especially as it gets closer to Sunday, because things will change over the weekend. If Christian Kirk or anyone I've talked about or will talk about, if they pull up on the injury report with like a hamstring injury and they somehow suit up, and the injury occurred like on Friday or something, like obviously make an adjustment, be smart, use common sense here. But if Zay Jones doesn't play, I think Christian Kirk, his role is just that much more secure. Zay Jones has been out. They have their bye week next week. I'm guessing they'll probably hold out Zay Jones one more week and just get him healthy. So Christian Kirk, he should get at least one more week of kind of being the main guy there in that receiving core. So fire him up as a nice wide receiver 2 in week 8 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And my final wide receiver start of the week is Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. I already kind of mentioned how I felt like I couldn't make Lamar Jackson a start of the week just because he's pretty much an auto start at this point. But I am going to kind of pivot to Zay Flowers as a start of the week at a different position on the same team. I think at the wide receiver position. I do think he's going to have a great week this week. He's had his ups and downs so far this season, but we know he's an explosive player. He's a great athlete. He looks good on the field. And he's he's seen a fair amount of targets here. Here's all of his game totals and targets: 10, 5, 10, 4, 11, 8, 6. As a rookie, that's very good. He's had some high target games in there. In the last few weeks here in half PPR, 9.8, 14.1, 9.5. I just like the matchup. I like the player. Not necessarily like a must start, but he's taken on the Arizona Cardinals, and I just don't think their defense is going to be able to stop this offense. In week 7, the Baltimore, I watched quite a bit of that game. Their offense just looked amazing against a really good team in the Detroit Lions. I know that the Ravens were at home, but still they beat them 38-6. That offense really didn't look like it was clicking this year. But coming off a really big game in week 7, now they get the Arizona Cardinals. This is definitely a spot where I could see Zay Flowers having his biggest game of the year, potentially finishing as a wide receiver 1. I wouldn't rank him as a wide receiver 1. I would play him as more of a wide receiver 2, but I think he's due for a big play here, and in this matchup, he could definitely do that. So play Zay Flowers with confidence in week 8 against the Arizona Cardinals. And then to kind of keep with the theme of like questioning if I can even talk about a certain player, we're going to move on to the tight end position, where I'm going to go with Darren Waller, tight end of the New York Giants. There's been times in this guy's career where he's a locked in every week auto start. It's kind of like, hey, I'm start Travis Kelce this week. He's my start of the week. Obviously, you'd be laughed at if you said that. But Darren Waller, the last handful of years here, couple years, he's had his ups and downs. He started kind of down this year. He had 10.6 points in week 2, but weeks 1, 3, and 4 was 5.1, 3.5, and 3.6 points. People are wondering, like, do I need to find another option at tight end? Since then, he's had 12.6, 6.8, and then 19.3 points last week in half PPR. I think Darren Waller is back for fantasy, and I highly doubt that you have a better option than him. Maybe if you picked up Laporta off the waiver wire and had Waller, or if you drafted both of them, maybe you can make the case where there's a real decision here. But if you have Waller, I would just suggest playing him in week 8 against the Jets. The Jets do give up production to the tight end position, even though their defense is very good. I don't expect this to be a really high-scoring game between the Jets and the Giants, the kind of gross New York battle. But at a gross tight end position, I think Waller is a pretty good bet for decent yardage, and would not shock me if he got in the end zone here in week 8 against the Jets. He is currently questionable, dealing with a little bit of an injury. That's kind of been the story with him all season. So I'm kind of just assuming it's sort of like a similar type of thing, and he'll be good to go. But like I've said throughout the video, if reports come out that, whoa, this injury is worse than initially reported, or if he's going to be limited or anything like that, adjust accordingly. But as of this recording, I really like Darren Waller as a solid tight end 1 start this week against the Jets. All right, now it's time to get a little more nasty at the tight end position, and we're going to go with Jake Ferguson, Dallas Cowboys tight end. He's one of those guys that, he's kind of been in the streaming conversation all year. He's had his ups, he's had his downs, but in week 8, if you're desperate at tight end and you need someone to start, I think Jake Ferguson is someone you can pick up and play because it's a really good matchup against the Rams. They are a great matchup for tight ends. They give up a lot of points to that position. And no, Jake Ferguson is no Travis Kelce or even Darren Waller or Laporta or anything like that. But if you need someone to start, I like Jake Ferguson as a tight end 1. He's had his games where he's seen a fair amount of targets. In fact, half of his games, he's seen 7 targets in 3 out of 6 games. The other 3, 4, 3, and 1. So you don't love that, but unless you really have that elite option at tight end, which you probably don't, and if you do, you probably skipped out of this video by now. Unless you have one of those guys, you're probably looking for someone to start. I've been going from like Cole Kmet, and now I'm throwing in someone else I'm going to talk about next here in this video. But if Jake Ferguson is out there, I think he's a nice little streaming option, someone that you might be happy that you played, a low tight end 1 in week 8 against the Rams. And then finally, we're going to go with Taysom Hill, tight end of the New Orleans Saints. This is the guy I was alluding to when I was talking about Ferguson. This is who I picked up to play over Cole Kmet, with Justin Fields still probably not playing this week. He didn't start the year hot for fantasy, but the last couple of weeks, 8.8 and 14.8 points for fantasy. The tight end 9 and 5 and half PPR. He's actually getting it done through the air, as well as being used a little bit on the goal line as a runner. So if you're new to fantasy, Taysom Hill is pretty much just gadget player who's usually listed as a tight end. He never really played tight end that much throughout his career. He's been used more as a runner, occasionally catching passes. He's, someone that they turn to at quarterback for a few trick plays here and there, or if there's injuries, he's someone that the Saints will turn to. But the last few weeks, he's seen 8 and 5 targets. Like, he's actually being used as a passing game weapon. And last week against Jacksonville, 5 for 18 on the ground, had a goal line touchdown, was a tight end 5 on the week. I just want to bring him up because if you're kind of at this tier of tight end where you're looking for a Jake Ferguson or some sort of like streaming option, Logan Thomas, someone like that, Taysom Hill has something that those guys do not, and that is week winning upside. Throughout his career, he's had these random weeks where he'll go off and be the tight end 1 on the week, put up 20 plus points, have a passing touchdown, have a rushing touchdown, have a receiving touchdown. He'll get it done some way. So I just want to bring him up week 8 against the Colts. He should be utilized in some capacity. Again, I'm not playing him over a locked-in guy like, a Waller, Andrews, Kelsey, someone like that, a Hawkinson if he's good to go. But if you're looking for a streamer and he's out there, that's definitely someone that I would plug in and play just because of that extra upside. If he gets 4 points and the other guy you're going to play gets 6 points, who cares? But if you pick up that guy that gets 6 points and Taysom Hill has 25 points, which I'm not calling for, but it is in the range of outcomes, then you're going to be really sad and it might cost you a week. So he is dealing with a chest injury, it looks like. As of this recording on Thursday, he's been limited. We'll have to see what the reports are moving forward, make sure he's healthy. And Juwan Johnson, I'm not sure if he's out or if it's still up in the air, but he's just another tight end there. So if he's out, that just means probably more opportunity for Taysom Hill. So I like Taysom Hill as like a low tight end 1, high tight end 2, but with crazy upside in week 8 against the Colts. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. I recorded it a little bit earlier in the week, so please monitor the news over the weekend. Please, please, please. I cannot edit this video after I post it, so monitor what's going on with injuries and things of that nature. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.